what has happened to masculinity over the last 40 years is not good for men or women. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So there are a few dots I'm going to connect here, several. And for my analytical systems thinkers like myself, I think a light bulb might turn on here. You might start to see a new perspective that's worth exploring further. So my ex-wife was from Jamaica. I was around Jamaican culture, Jamaican in-laws. It was such an awesome household. You know, we actually ended up rooming together because I lived in a ski town, which was impossible to survive in without a group. And there was a lot of good food in that household. There was a lot of good vibes. My brother-in-law was amazing. Mother-in-law was amazing. I got nothing bad to say about the ex-wife at this point either. But it was exposure to a different culture. And outside of the household, I was extremely uncomfortable around the Jamaican community, especially the men. There was a strong sense of machismo. There was no, it was quite opposite of my upbringing, where everything is about being quiet, getting along, being polite, not having any confrontation. Whereas they leaned into their masculinity and their femininity, and it was something that like I said, it made me really uncomfortable. I didn't jive well with a lot of the guys outside of my household. Years later, I went out to live 1,300 miles away from home, out on a beach, worked on a pier. This was in California, had a lot of exposure to Hispanic and Mexican culture. And my high school was very mixed. There was a lot of black kids, there was a lot of Asians, but I didn't have much exposure in my lifetime to, Hispanic, Latino, Mexicans, or, more Middle Eastern, Persian descent. So, I noticed something when I was out there interacting with all of these, mostly Mexican Hispanic people, usually within a generation, if not from Mexico, just one generation separated. And, everybody just this real hardworking, my job in this world is to make my own way. Nobody's here to rescue me. And it was, I had a really positive experience getting to understand the Mexican culture a little bit better. And then back in my hometown, one of my friends brought me to, we have a Olympic medalist in Wichita. His name was Nico Hernandez, a boxer, had a boxing gym. Took me to a match there, and it was almost all, again, Mexican and Hispanic people there. Young boys, dads up there, supporting them. If somebody did get knocked out, the competitor was right there worried about the guy he just knocked down. But there was really this thing that they were building in the culture at a young age of strength, of being tough, of go out and get it. And, that was pretty opposite from what I know as someone that came from a very wonderful, comfortable, middle-class Christian family. Everybody was educated. Everybody's got bachelor's degrees on both sides of the family. Almost everybody's in education on one side of the family. And, it was just, there was never that culture of machismo was not part of my upbringing. So the next dot we're going to connect is the systematic devaluation of the U.S. dollar that since 1913 through a bunch of different things. Maybe we'll talk about this another time. This isn't an economic channel, but there are a bunch of points in time, 1913, 1914, 1971, 2008, 2020, where we're working to get less actual buying power, less economic energy. After 1971, the whole concept of a single earner income household became less and less viable. At the same time, I think there's probably correlation here, causation with women's lib, where we needed to have two earners in the household. And don't get me wrong, I want women to have agency. I don't want anybody to be stuck in a bad situation, relying on an unhealthy relationship. I want them to have agency, equal work for equal pay for equal work. I'm not against any of that. But we had shamed the idea that motherhood, that supporting the husband, that the aligned team to serve the household and the family the best was now shameful. It was second class. And that was, again, I believe because we've devalued the economic energy, the buying power that we get back out of the work that we're putting in. Now, at the same time, we have the education and industrial system. These are 200-year-old models. You know, our modern education system came from Prussia, a predecessor to Germany, in 1843. The system was based on standardization, out of getting everybody to follow the same directions, to do the same thing, to basically be one part of an industrial puzzle, right? You're going to put the same rivet in the same hole. You're going to carry the same piece from here to there. This was far more efficient than having one person doing all these different pieces. This was also great for preparing people for military service. And by the way, I love the military. I think that things that they train into people, things that they build into men, it's amazing. But it also really set us up for following orders, whether it be in the industrial world or in the military. Now, as our buying power, our economic energy has been diminished over time, even though we might get more dollars, those dollars are worth less actual value. We've lost agency as men. We've lost that thing that, you know, the machismo, that work hard, you're responsible for your own outcome thing that I really saw in my exposure to Mexican and Hispanic culture, that we have basically killed as a society over time. And it does benefit the asset holders and the guys at the top of the ladder that understand how this stuff works. But it comes at our expense as normal people who have been conditioned into following directions, relying on someone else to tell us what to do, to tell us how much we're worth, and to be basically in charge of our own economic energy, capability, and output. And when you combine all of these factors, we have been just conditioned to deeply, internally, subconsciously believe that we are helpless and hopeless. When we've got this deep, biological, primal instinct that if we're hungry, we need to go hunt and kill to eat, or we need to farm and grow. We need to truly protect. We need to battle, or maybe we need to go and conquer. There's this thing that has really been killed inside of modern men over the last 40 years or longer. And our conscience is just screaming at us that the natural order of things, that our reason to exist is not being fulfilled. But we're also at the most amazing moment in the reality of human history, that when we can start to undo this conditioning, this wiring, this shame of masculinity, and start to actually pursue, to understand we have agency, we can take advantage of all these things. There's no barriers. A person with a phone can make millions. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. You have to learn. You have to figure these things out. Everybody's path is going to be different, but we have never, ever, ever had more opportunity, even though we're also in one of the dirtiest parts of the, you know, if you watch Ray Dalio a lot, the 6-step system to financial and systemic collapse. And some people are going to come out fine. Those who own assets, those who own certain types of businesses or brands, things are going to get rocky for everybody, but some people are going to get to the other side of this just fine. But there's probably going to be a couple generations that can't retool, can't reskill, don't learn this thing that, you know, the next generations, whether they like it or not, they're going to be forced back into becoming men. They're going to be forced into creating their own path, to get strong, to get uncomfortable, to fight their way back, to hunt, to kill, to eat. This is an amazing moment right now. And you can't just, oh yeah, hey, I see, I realize it, I get it. That's not enough, right? We have to actually find that belief within ourselves to actually move in that direction. And where does that come from? The foundation to everything is fitness and habits. We have to get rid of our vices. Once we prove to ourselves, that person that we see in the mirror every day is going to keep moving forward and do hard, uncomfortable things no matter what. That's how we take back our strength as men. How we are able to make society better for men and women, so that it's not just 90% of the women fighting for the top 10% of men. It's our responsibility to make that 30 or 40% of men who are worthy, who have demonstrated excellence, who are the people who can actually protect and provide, who are not just reliant, compliant, submissive, forced into a box that somebody else says they belong into. The things that used to work based on an old, antiquated education and industrial system, they no longer work. And for the few that they still do, they're going to work less and less. And if somebody can even continue to generate an income doing the same thing for a long time, it's not going to keep up with the pace of inflation. If they don't understand investment and assets, and they don't build something for themselves, they're going to be in a bad place. So, we could either be upset about all this, be angry at the system, run around, put our valuable time, energy, passion, and emotions into posting things online, dancing around with signs, yelling at people, or we can just put our heads down, get uncomfortable, and get to work. I love you. Thanks for following this journey with me. I'm still building. I haven't arrived, but I guarantee you this is only going in one direction no matter what comes in my way. And you're along for the ride with me. I'm along for the ride with you. Catch you later.